Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, Great Lakes. This is your host, Jeff Liskay, a.k.a. Great Lakes Dude. Well, we've had a couple good podcasts. We had Darcy Egan out, local plain dealer writer for 50 years, but super stoked to invite a good friend and one of the fishiest guys that I know in and around the Great Lakes. Lives in Michigan. It's going to be Phil, and wait till you hear about what he has to say. And Phil Cook has been a long time fisherman in Michigan. He's been in the fly fishing industry for at least over 30 years that I know of. But wait to hear what we have to say. It's going to be super fun. We're going to talk and get fishy. We're going to get down to details more than just talking about it. So welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
I appreciate the kind words, man, because you're one of the fishiest people I know, too. So
That's how we're going to have a good time today, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Always a good time.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Phil? Like, how you got in fishing, when, what do you got?
Sure. So, I mean, I was lucky enough to have a family cabin on the Sable River that I used to go to pretty much every summer. The Sable River is up in Michigan, near Grayling, Michigan. It's a trout river. And every summer I would go there and spend a large chunk of time with my grandparents, playing in the swamps around the cabin, catching frogs, catching trout on worms, catching trout on flies, probably getting into some things I shouldn't. But it was really fun and really caught kind of inspiration for being around water. And at that point, my life flowing water. So, took that and took some early night fishing experiences with my dad. And really, I would say that really lit a fire under me for fly fishing and fishing in general, but mainly fly fishing. And kind of went from there, started, I think I got my first tying vise when I was 8, tied my first fly, shortly thereafter. And kind of took off from there. I guess my first official job in the fly fishing industry would have been tying woolly buggers for a local coffee shop called the Woolly Bugger.
No way.
Yeah. And then started tying flies and doing some walking guide trips for a small, now defunct shop out of Patagonia, Michigan. And from there, actually went out west for school. Didn't really get good enough grades to stay out there, but I will tell you that I learned a lot about trout. I actually got bored with trout in Wyoming. And in the summers, I would work for a shop called the Fly Factory in Grayling, Michigan, and live at my cabin. And then did that full time, became a guide full time there while I was going to school down in Saginaw Valley. Eventually got my degree in political science and biology with plans to go into environmental law. And during that time frame, I was working as a guide and then also worked at Little Forks Outfitters in Midland, Michigan. And once I got my degree from Saginaw Valley, I took a year off to kind of gather myself for law school. And the plant manager from Scientific Anglers came down to Little Forks and said, "Hey, we want to bring customer service to Midland. We want to hire you." So I started working for Scientific Anglers and worked there for 5.5 years. And then in 2017, started working with a colleague of ours, Jerry Darkus, also a mentor of mine and yours, I guess, and started working as a sub rep for him with plans to take over his rep agency. Now I operate that rep agency, which is called Backeddy Sales. And, we do Scott fly rods, Able reels, Ross reels, Airflow fly lines, Montana Fly, Echo Fly Fishing, among a bunch of other really nice brands. So,
yeah, that's pretty good. That's how we sort of have our bond, is that, I work underneath your umbrella as a pro, but there's a difference of what I call like business reps and then fishing reps. I think you balance that very good platform between the two. Like, there's something to say about fishing reps that have gained respect in the industry, because when you go to a shop or something, it's just not like, oh, this is a great product. You can say, no, I go here, I use this, and they see you there. So I think there's something to say about that, don't you think, Phil? Like somebody that's actually on the water. You're probably on the water 200 days a year, one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, like I mean, one of the many things that I learned from my dad is to really like, if you're going to present something to somebody, whether it's like a sales thing, like whether it's a sales item, like a product, or whether it's an idea, like you should have some conviction in it. And, for me, that conviction comes from time on the water and using a product, right? So like if I pick up a new brand or there's a new product that's brand new to me, like I don't feel fully comfortable recommending the product unless I've used it myself and can speak to, its effectiveness or non-effectiveness for that matter. So, I mean, like, I think that there are guys in the industry that are out there to sell mainly. I think there's guys that are out there in the industry just to fish, and I do try to toe that line, sometimes maybe leaning one way or the other, but I really do try to toe that line and recommend products that I personally use or can recommend with conviction,
You're right. You're on the water, you're testing it. And then I think there's some, when you go into a shop where you're talking just an average angler, you're saying like, hey, no, this is it. Like, this is the what. Now, this one's probably not as good as what I, would like it to be, but, these are the like the shining stars of my lineup. Would you say something like that?
Yeah, it's okay to not like something.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's okay to have something in your brand portfolio that maybe doesn't pass the mustard test, and it's okay to say that. And I mean, honestly, it's less that than stuff that just doesn't really cater to our fisheries. Like for instance, there's a lot of products in the fly fishing industry that cater to small flies and long leaders and light tippet. And I mean, I grew up fishing the Sable, which is considered one of the more technical trout rivers in the, at least in my region that I cover. And the reality is that we rarely use flies smaller than a size 18. There's many trout streams I can think of in Colorado and Wyoming where that's considered a big fly, an 18, or at least a medium-sized fly. And, they're using flies down to a 24, 26, 28 on a fairly regular basis.
Well, that's sort of where I cut my teeth too, right? It was on the Sable Pen Rods. You probably remember it.
Oh yeah, it was right across the street from Fly Factory, where I got my start. So,
right? Yeah, this is cabins that you could drop a marble in the one corner, it would just ping pong its way out the back door.
Right. Oh yeah.
But so let's move on. What is new? What fish are you chasing? Like, you're always on the cutting edge. You're setting the bar. I think for everybody in your area, like, hey, yeah, you got the trout game, you got this, but like, hey, what's on the cutting edge? What's on your plate now? What are you chasing? Like, what are you doing besides the sales stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of funny that you mentioned trout, right? Because I mean that is the root of my knowledge, and it's kind of has transferred and transformed into many different avenues. I would feel like at this point, but still, one thing fascinates me more than anything else, which is seeing the eat. So I like to see the eat. If I get to see the fish before the eat, it's even better, right? So I think that really stems from my love of dry fly fishing. But at this point, I almost don't care that much what the stripes or spots or, the shape of the fish or even the species of the fish, as much as I care about the situation. And what I mean by that is I want to be able to see the fish before I cast. Okay. So if that's a fish eating dry flies, great. If that's a carp mudding on a big sand flat, also great. If that's schools of cohos swimming down a beach, awesome. I don't weight those any differently as better or worse. But if I get to see the fish before I cast, or see like a blow up, like blitzing bait fish or whatever it is, that's what I'm most passionate about. The second thing that I just absolutely love doing is fishing flies over and around structure, so streamer fishing. And those are really, I would say, my two favorites. But my big disclaimer with that and picking and choosing what I like to do is there's no kind of fishing I don't like, fly or conventional. There's only kinds of fishing that I like more than others.
Yeah, right. I think we've covered this before, that I think a great fly angler has to have an open mind and understanding conventional gear as much as fly, right? I mean, I think when me and you go out, if the wind's blowing, I'm going to be honest, we're not throwing a fly rod. We're going to do the research, but then, if the wind dies, or we'll fight the wind as best we can. But that is the key of understanding to be a great fly angler, is understanding how to manipulate the fly to imitate what the conventional gear anglers can do way better than us. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I think there's a bunch of crossover for that. And once you kind of migrate outside of the rivers, and start fishing big water, with some depth, you begin to understand that only limiting yourself to the top 10 or 15 feet of the water column is eliminating a whole lot of possibility. And once that gets drilled into your head, you start thinking about ways to get deeper, both with fly and conventional, and then crossing over the two, right? And some of the best flies that I can think of off the top of my head actually came from trying to imitate a lure. Anything with lead eyes, jig. Anything like Tommy's Drunken Disorderly is designed to be like a shad wrap, like a jointed rapala, right? So, a lot of the best flies that I can think of, I know a couple that imitate tube jigs, for instance, are actually just, our best possible version of a lure, or bait that's been used for years and years.
Right. I mean, the Great Lakes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, between Russ Madden, and Tommy Lynch, I mean, the articulating floating fly, and then this, with Tommy Drunken Disorderly, then you've got, Russ Madden, of course, was like the first, one of the first with the articulating fly, and you've got Kelly Gallup. This seems like our geographic area was pretty on the cutting edge of these flies, wouldn't you think? I don't know that, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
So I would say yes, and I think that comes from necessity, really. I think innovation is bred from necessity, and I think that like you look at a circus peanut, right? And Russ is a good buddy of mine, but I mean, like, one of my favorite things that he said, I'm like, where'd you come up with the idea for a circus peanut? He said, well, I just put two of the best flies that were ever invented back to back. The woolly bugger,
Right.
A D&D, I think, can take quite a lot of, like the D&D can take some I guess the roots of that would be a zoo cougar. And the roots of the zoo cougar are a muddler minnow mixed with like the old flatwing gray ghost, right? So these are all these flies are derivatives of something that came before it. It's not like, Russ or Kelly or Tommy just sat down at a vise and whipped up this thing without any prior knowledge of any prior flies. What they did is they improved an existing pattern. And in the case of Michigan, our forage is generally bigger, okay, because a lot of our trout streams are on the cusp of being too warm. So like our crayfish are bigger, our mayflies are bigger, our bait fish are bigger, and to imitate a bigger bait, you had to put it on two hooks, right? Because if you only put it on a single hook, the fish would eat the back half of the fly inevitably and not get hooked, And there's another good Russ story where he had Mark Sadati in the boat, okay? And the Sadati slammer is a single hook in the front, in the head of the hook. And it's got these big long tails. And Russ tells me, he's like, Mark brought that fly here, and it was like fish had never seen anything like it. He had like a bunch of fish eat this fly, but for whatever reason, they weren't getting hooked because they were eating midway through the fly instead of right at the head of the hook like a striper would, which is what he designed them for. So he took the slammer, modified it a little bit, made it a little bit lighter, set the hook back, and that's where like the flash monkey came from, right? So I mean, there's, when you talk about all these fly patterns that people know and love today, they're almost always derivatives of something that came before it.
Right. Everybody says, oh, what's your patterns? I says, my pattern is just window dressing on another one, right? It's just like, there's always something that goes on. It's like, okay, I had more weight. I take this off. It sinks more, whatever. But it's all about, like you said, that base fly. But so we talked a little bit about that. Yeah, Sable net. Let's dig into, because a lot of anglers aren't aware of how great and how many locations there are in and around Michigan in the Great Lakes, from the Upper Peninsula, which is like another state in itself, right, to New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and on the Canadian side too, that needs to be explored. But maybe you could just say, hey, where would an angler like wants to explore the Great Lakes? Or, where would they be, like, what's a good location? Like maybe just give them some, like, okay, this is what you're sort of looking for.
Google Earth.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, you like certain predator fish are going to use like hard edges, right? So you can actually locate a lot of this stuff on Google Earth and walk into it where there's hard edges. And those predator fish try to push bait fish up on the hard edges, right? Okay, you use Google Earth for that. You use Google Earth to find the flats that you want to go fish, right? Whether they're like little rock spits where smallmouth and drum might hang out, or big sand flats that carp would use. You can use it for a variety of different items, both whether you're on foot or in a boat. Once you do have access to like a big water boat, then you can start looking at like topographic maps, navionics, your Garmin, Humminbird, Lowrance units, whatever you have, those become a lot more helpful. But in terms of just like the foot soldiers out there, just looking at Google Earth and taking a chance will pay off a lot.
Right. I can't tell you how many times that the first day when I get to a new area that I really don't even wet a line. Mm-hmm. I do the mafia drive-by, right? You just, like you see something on Google Earth or Onyx or whatever you're using the platform. It's like, okay, this is the area I want to fish. And then you look at it, it's like it doesn't turn out to what it really wants to be. So you move around. And then I guess it would be like prove that that's viable for me to fish. And you might make it like, okay, I got to stop there.
Right.
Okay. Perfect.
Right. And a lot of times like what happens is you'll have a list, right? And then the weather just turns to complete dog crap, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to go and I'm just going to scout today. And I mean, like, I probably have 6 to 10 of those days a year where I'll go and just like drive, the kids are at school, whatever, like drive for 6 hours, go check out a few different accesses that I had marked, and then just put them in the storage bank. I've used some of those. I haven't used some of them, at this point. But, I think that's important. If somebody is really adamant about learning new water and learning new techniques and all that kind of stuff, I think that scouting element is as important as any other element in that, in that portfolio.
Patagonia just launched the next evolution in waders, and they're built for anglers just like you. The Swift Current line includes ultralight, packable options for the hiking, crew, and expedition-ready waders if you're hard on your gear like me. They're designed for comfort, built from recycled materials, and backed by Patagonia's ironclad warranty. You can check them out right now at wetflyswing.com/swiftcurrent. That's wetflyswing.com/SWIFTCURRENT. Swift Current waders. Check them out now. Check out Jackson Hole Fly Company today. Premium fly gear straight to your door without the premium price. Jackson Hole Fly Company designs and builds their own fly rods, reels, flies, and gear, delivering quality you can trust at prices that let you fish more and spend less. Whether you're picking up a fly rod for the first time or guiding every day, they've got what you need. Check them out right now. That's JacksonHoleFlyCompany.com. JacksonHoleFlyCompany.com.
So we have Google Earth that gives us the spots, the sand and the rocks and the points and that. But, there's another thing with the visual confirmation, like you said, is that we want clear enough water for this, for the salmonids and the steelhead and the smallmouth to see our fly. But we still want to have that little bit of mystery to it so they really bite good. So there's that fine window of sometimes we have these 5 or 6 melt runs that we have that we're looking for that sweet spot of water. Is that what you're sort of looking for too? Is that little bit of mystery that's not crystal clear?
Yeah. I mean, and the great thing about the Great Lakes is, and maybe the maddening thing is that, even on what feel like identical days, whether like a seiche moves in and like the water moves out, and then all of a sudden the water you were fishing that was 68 degrees drops to 50 degrees. I've had that happen. I've had literally the same exact conditions 2 days apart. One day we slam smallmouth, and then 2 days later they're gone.
When the water cools, do the salmons move in then?
Yeah, a lot of times in those same spots. But I mean, like it's when you're dealing with open water in the Great Lakes, like it is unpredictable, and you really have to start each day with essentially a new puzzle to solve, right? Like you can't go and plan. I mean, you can go and use that as a starting point, but you can't go and beat up on the same fish you did 2, 3, 4 days prior, let alone a couple weeks prior. Most likely they've moved. Most likely the situation has changed, and you got to figure everything out.
Right. And I think that would be, as you know, your son's in tournaments, you fish tournaments, I've fished tournaments. It's the angler that can figure the puzzle out the fastest.
Right.
Right. So sometimes as a fishing guide, we don't figure it out to almost the end of the day.
Right.
But if you're out the next day, it sort of like shortens the learning curve. But I think that's the major stumbling block that the weekend warriors, like they they go there and they expect to catch that day. Well, that's the difference between a fishing guide who spends 200 and some days on the water that, believe me, we get skunked.
Oh, yeah.
We get skunked. But we have days that we don't get skunked because we are learning from those days that we get skunked. So that's pretty important. Let's narrow it down to let's talk a little bit about the smallmouth. I mean, everybody, the ditch pickles, we get beat up because we love them, but that is our bread and butter. They love to eat chicken fillets. Maybe just talk a little bit about the smallmouth.
Yeah, I mean, smallmouth are fascinating native species to Midland and the Great Lakes. They bite good, they fight good, they're hardy. I fished them in like gin clear water where they're super spooky and they're on the fin, like in New Zealand. I fished them where you cast anything within 30 feet of them out on a Great Lakes flat and they'll eat it. I've seen them incredibly, incredibly receptive to eating. I've seen them be real difficult too. They just have this just huge variability and really a tendency to draw in on patterns that makes them fun to fish for, right? So, you can go through the variables, you can go through the checkbox and like figure out what the trigger points are. And then you can put together a really good day because they are patternable, and the other thing that's really fascinating about smallmouth is how much they migrate, right? So in the Great Lakes, like I said, I've been like here today, gone tomorrow type situations with smallmouth for sure. I've also been here today, here tomorrow type stuff, and here the next day too, but generally speaking in the Great Lakes, like I rarely see a pattern last for more than a couple weeks.
Right.
And then you can couple that up with the migrations in the river, right? They migrate from way upriver, miles and miles downstream. I mean, I have 30, 40, 50, 60 miles up or downstream to fall, winter, and early spring water. And then they do it all again. They migrate back up into the rivers to where their feeding stations are, spend, latter spring, summer, and early fall in those areas, and migrate right back.
We just had a presentation here in Ohio where they're actually doing some pit tagging and location of smallmouth. And they found out that, the spring spawners, of course, run up the rivers and then they go back out. But there is definitely the river runners that doesn't seem to migrate too far from the rivers along the Great Lakes. But there are some that show that, those never run up the river. That's how Mother Nature protects themselves. But those are those ones that I struggle to really get a pattern on, like you said, right? I mean, this is something about fly fishing is that, because me and you both have a boat. And there are times that those pelagic fish, they're 28 to 30 some feet deep. But there are going to be, wouldn't you think there's always for the angler that doesn't have all the bougie stuff that me and you have, there's always a resident population within for the foot soldier, like you said, don't you think?
Yes, but I think that, if you're willing to wade chest deep, you know, you're not always going to be able to find them in the super shallow stuff. You can sometimes, but more often than not, you got to be willing to do that. And then, you can almost always pick off a few in the riprap, like around piers, like around, jetties, that kind of stuff. You guys have actually a wonderful lakeshore down here around Cleveland that I've kind of explored a little bit with you. We have less of that in Michigan, but that kind of stuff almost always holds fish, whether it's bass, drum, catfish, name your flavor of the day, but that riprap almost always holds some sort of fish. So, that's easily walkable before or after work, an hour or two here or there,
Yeah, I just got back from Toronto with Drift Outfitters, their shop's right in downtown Toronto. They got a beautiful harbor there, over 5 million people there, and they've got a vibrant fishery that you could just basically get out in the downtown Toronto area, right on Lake Ontario, and that they got a viable fishery, like you said. Is it going to be the giants? Probably not, but there's still plenty of opportunities for the foot soldier too. But
I've heard Chicago's like that too.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like lower, like southern Lake Michigan, there's spots where you can walk in down there. And I can tell you that for me personally, I've walked in down there and seen some huge drum and carp that would be accessible on the fly. You just got to put the time in and put the miles in. And you can find some stuff in your backyard that is pretty cool.
Right. And I think, let's look at this. Like, let's just say we're going to be a foot soldier. And I think that me and you, we have ants in our pants and we're looking for moving water, right? We're going to find some active fish. But if you're going to be that along, without a boat, you have to be mobile, right? Like you might hit 6 or 8 different areas in that harbor just to find the fish. What you think is like, I have so many people that just take the spoon, they go out there, they cast the same spot, they leave. But you got to be mobile, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's probably the most critical thing is being willing to move. And like you can even relate that to some of the rivers, like some of the undammed rivers that I fish for steelhead. For a while there, I was pretty adamant about floating. I still enjoy floating those rivers, but if you float a stretch on an undammed river and there's no fish there, you're gonna have a tough day. But if you are walking in and you fish a couple holes, don't get anything, and then move 20 miles upriver or downriver, you can get into them, right? And you're more mobile. Or let's say that river, isn't even fishing. You can drive 45 minutes away to a different river and see if there's fish in there. And, I think that people are quick to say, oh, well, people with boats have all the, like, they're going to get them because they have boats. But sometimes being on foot, makes you slow down. It makes you observe a little bit more and in turn be more successful in some cases. So
right. They can go on the foot or in your vehicle. You could go from port to port where for a boat angler, you got to relaunch, relocate, which we do if things are bad. But I might be able to hit, and you might be able to hit 3 locations in a day, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes more. And I have.
So let's talk a little bit, the smallmouth bass, that's one of our passions. But I think the hidden gem, which has been a fishery that's been starting to develop, and you were right on the cutting edge of this, is the cohos that are being reintroduced to Michigan, and then also the Atlantic salmon. Let's talk a little bit about that. You don't have to give away any secrets, but let's just chit chat a little bit about that.
Well, it's I think it's pretty commonly known at this point that the state of Michigan has wanted to, bring Atlantic salmon in the fold, and for that matter, even coho salmon, simply more into the fold with the collapse of the Kings in Lake Huron and to a lesser degree, certainly Lake Michigan. And there was a lot of crying going on about the disappearance of the Kings. For better or worse. The Atlantics are awesome. They're cool. I was lucky enough I caught them on a small East Side river in the early 2010s, like I think 2011 or 2012, and then found them below foot on the Sable, which was like kind of the first major one that where the DNR, Michigan DNR had planted them. And we found out they eat streamers really good, in clear water, sometimes off the surface, so that was a really cool discovery. It's gotten more people, but it's pretty easy to look up the stocking records on Michigan and see where those Atlantics are stocked and give you a good idea of where to go. One of my I think big pushes for the spring is to really figure out the springtime Atlantic fishery. That's one that I haven't really dialed in yet. Have caught some coho so far this spring, but the springtime coho fishery is pretty well known, especially on the west side of the state. The springtime Atlantic fishery is something that's new and rather exciting to me because, as I had mentioned, Atlantics and cohos were kind of a replacement for kings after they dropped off. And the big thing for Atlantics and coho that they have in common is they tend to eat invertebrates. They eat stuff other than alewife, right? So they'll eat smelt, they'll eat shad, they're very, very much opportunistic feeders, as are steelhead. And whereas kings were solely like strictly eating alewife. So what that does is it opens up all these different doors that you could possibly, catch coho or Atlantics on. Like you could hypothetically get them on dry flies. You could hypothetically, you could get them on a small like rabbit strip, type zonker. You could get them on, these big smelt type patterns, right? I mean, you could there's so much variability that it makes them more fun than kings. Because kings, you're just fishing one fly, right? Or one bait. It imitates an alewife. So, like for instance, this year I was fishing 15 feet of water, a couple miles from this one port that I frequently launched at last fall, and there were rainbows out there, right? Well, they just started planting rainbows in the last like 3 or 4 years. And there were rainbows out in 15 feet of water blitzing bait, right? Like striper style, coming out of the water like dolphins, right? I mean, it was sick, right? It was super cool. And I had flies that, the first day skunked, second day I went out there. I had a couple follow to the boat, right? Second day I went out there, I got one. And actually I was with Jake Wright when I was out there, and I got one, and then I slowly began to figure it out. And I think the last couple of days before they got out of there, I think the water temps got too cold. But the last couple of days, we were up in like that 14 to 15 fish hookup, and it was a process of dialing it in. It was a process of figuring out the size of the forage. It was a process of figuring out when to cast, how to cast. Figuring out if you could see which direction the fish were going when they were blitzing, all that kind of stuff. And, it took some days, it took some time, but eventually we got to the point where we could go there and put together a consistent, positive day.
Right. The last time I did it, I was fishing flies way too big.
Yeah.
And I think the spring thing, like you're talking about with these Atlantics, are that because they're not oriented to the spawn and it's like the spring, I think that's going to be the next level for us to like really, really score on those fish, because they're going to be in there like the cohos, not thinking about the spawn. They're going to be in there to just do their main thing, just chowing down. But maybe talk about like downsizing, because that's what I saw was more like smaller, buggier flies rather than like you would think, like you said, they're very opportunistic. And Atlantis can get pretty finicky, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. And most of my stuff was maybe the length of the diameter of a quarter, right?
Okay.
Yes, it was small.
You might want to say that one more time.
Yeah. It was like 1 to 2 inches in length, essentially.
Right.
And light. Really small, and then fished on light line too, which is key. But like 8 to 10 pound test generally.
Yeah, so Atlantics are really cool. They're great fish, and they will eat chicken feathers, but you should probably really think about, there are salmon still. They're not as easy as the rainbow, steelhead. They'll just keep attacking, but you do have to like line down and do some do some research on, like, maybe if you're not getting them and you can see them, right? Definitely with first step would be to line down and then maybe do the smaller fly. Is there any certain colors,
No, mostly dark.
Dark.
Anything in dark tones. But I will say, and just add to that, like I had a bunch of situations this year where the rainbows were really selective too. I mean, you can call them like they were. I was calling them rainbows. They're the same thing as what we would call steelhead. I mean, they come in near shore, and they were picky. They would not eat a bigger hair jig or fly. They were eating small stuff, in that 1 to 2 inch class. So, I mean, my only theory behind it really is that there must have just been an overload of that size bait around, and that's what the fish were tuned into seeing. I see it with trout, really picky trout. They only eat one type of bug or one size bug. It was very, very similar out in big water.
Was the water really super clear when that happened, or was it?
No.
Okay. So that's what my go-to would be. It's like if the water has a little mystery to it, a little chalk to it or something, the wind's been blowing, it disturbed it, and you're on that like, okay, this is the day. We got the perfect disturbed water, but sometimes they just want to match the hatch.
Yeah, it wasn't what I would call stained, like Ohio stained, because Ohio stained is pretty stained. But no, I mean, there was a little bit of stain to the water. Like, I was surprised that they were eating that small forage.
Yeah. So if you haven't tried it, Michigan is a great place to, I would say probably easiest to catch an Atlantic salmon from the St. Mary's River all the way down through Huron. Currently, there's only very few on Lake Michigan, correct? It's just mostly Huron?
Yeah, but there are some inland lakes in Michigan that get them, and they grow large.
Okay.
Like they grow over 20 pounds. And there are some really good sight fishing opportunities there. And I mean, I would urge, any listeners out there to really look at what the stocking records are, utilize those, and, like fish around likely areas, whether it's a river outlet, a big gravel bar in a lake of sand. I mean, whatever it is, use your existing knowledge to seek it out.
Okay. So now we know that we've had a decline in the kings, and then there are some super nice kings been coming back. Is it throwing a fly at a king still viable? I mean, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's in my opinion, it's the best streamer fishing we got. And what I mean by streamer fishing is casting into structure and watching a fish pop up out of structure and chase your fly down. And why is it the best, right? You're talking about a 15 to 30 pound fish doing, essentially cartwheels and opening and closing its mouth behind your fly. And I mean, it'll put your poop in a groove is all I'm saying, And I mean, like when they chase it 30, 40, 50 feet and then eat next to your boat, it's something. I mean, we don't have that. And then I always tell people I think it's the hardest thing that we have on the streamer because, I understand and know that muskie are hard, right? In terms of the numbers and stuff. I would say kings are probably right in there, like similar numbers. 1 a day is great. That's a great day. But the fight from a king is what sets them apart.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you hook one and you got 10% done. You got 90% more to go. You got to keep them out of the wood. You got to, like fly lines blow up on those things, like I've had them eat a crankbait in half. I've had them, like they are, I think that they're the baddest fish that swims in the lakes. And, in Michigan and really in, over in New York and some of the other like really king heavy lakes, they've gotten this bad reputation, and I think they get a bad reputation because of the people that fish for them. Shouldn't say, I guess, the people that fish for them, but the methods that are used to fish for them and have been, like the snagging, the flossing, all that kind of stuff. I mean, to me, they're one of the baddest fish that swims. I've never seen a fish move as fast as a king. I've never had a fish pull as hard as I've had a king pull in freshwater.
Yeah, I mean, that is our titan of all the fish that we chase. I did notice one thing, stripping streamers, you're in a river and you've got this, you've got the posse that's in the wood, or you got the main pod that's in the gut, right? Okay, there's 20 to whatever, 30 in there. Those don't bite. But you get those little stragglers that are coming on the inside bend. There might be 1, 2, or 3 that are away from the pack. Those seem to be the ones that I can get to grab.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And then, I mean, the most likely of streamer spots, I would argue for pretty much just about any fish that I've ever streamer fished for, is almost always in the top or the tail out of the pool, right? Like right when the not even where you can't see the bottom at the top of a pool, but like where you can like kind of make out the bottom before the second drop. A lot of times they come off of that stuff and then tail outs, and it's like there have been days where I'm almost like, we should just skip the gut of the pool, right? Like whether we're fishing salmon or bass or whatever, because all the bites are coming from the top or the bottom, or like the aforementioned, kind of intermediate water in between.
Yeah.
Step into the world where the river whispers and the fishing is nothing short of legendary. This year, I ventured into the heart of eastern Idaho's Yellowstone Teton territory, where the fish were larger than life and the waters held the secrets of the best fly fishing out west. Yellowstone Teton territory is not just a location, it's a gateway to adventures that will etch themselves into your memory. With crystal clear rivers like the Henry's Fork and the South Fork of the Snake, and enough lakes to keep you going all year long, make your way to Yellowstone Teton territory and embark on a journey to one of North America's finest fly fishing destinations. Whether you're planning your trip now or just dreaming it up, the YTT is where those dreams turn into reality. Remember, Yellowstone Teton territory. That's Teton, Teton. It's time to experience eastern Idaho for yourself and support this podcast at the same time.
These are the glamour fish, but I know that, whatever's on the cutting edge, Phil, you seem to always manage to be diving it head first. So after last year's, and we're going to switch really big gears here from salmonids over to something that's not sort of in the Great Lakes, but I really need to ask this question to you.
Yeah.
So last year, cicada hatch.
Right.
Was crazy. It's coming again. What are you thinking?
Oh, I mean, I'll be there. That's about that,
Where's it going to be, man?
So I mean, it's going to be Tennessee, Southern Ohio, Southern Indiana, Kentucky. So, I mean, I call on the states of Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, right? So I will have a good place dialed in. I mean, I think the last time I was here with you in February, I think I was scouting some spots. Still scouting some spots, but yeah, I mean, it's really everything that I love about fly fishing. It's dry fly fishing. You're catching big fish. It's all sight fishing. It's weird, I mean, it's cicada camp, right? That I did in 2024 was an experience. I mean, we had, I think, 23 attendees. From all over the country. We had the owner of Montana Fly and the sales manager came out. The two owners of Ray Jeff Sports, who owns Echo Fly Fishing and Airlock, came out. And then I had several dealers from my territory join us at an Airbnb. And I can spot burn this because it's going to be 17 years until it happens again there. But it was on Decatur Lake in Illinois. Okay, which, you do a little bit of research, you find out it has the highest amount of carp per acre of any lake in the entire state of Illinois. And it also happened to be where the convergence of a 13-year and a 17-year cicada hatch, they were both coming off at the same time. And I can only describe Decatur as maybe the corn processing capital of the world. It actually smelled like it, right? So Russ Madden actually pointed this out, but the Capitol building did look like an ear of corn. There was a horrible smell a horrible smell coming from a factory over like one section of the lake. I think I also heard from him that it smelled like death and fried chicken, I think, or something. But anyway, it was an odd smell, but that lake was unbelievable. You had these trees that overhung the lake and were dropping cicada, and carp were just cruising down these banks like tarpon. And I mean, 30, 40, 50 fish days, on, generally like average 8 to 12, 8 to 15 pound fish, with some bigger, right, on this lake. So then that lake was a reservoir on the Sangamon River, and below the dam on the Sangamon River were tons of common carp, which we were catching up above in Decatur Lake, but also grass carp and Asian carp. One of which jumped in my boat when I was on plane, but that's a story for a different day. But
did you have the Viking hat on?
What? No. Actually, I had Jared May from Kling. He was in the boat, and the thing like narrowly missed. It was a narrow miss. You know what I mean? Like it was inches. It was and this thing flopped in the boat. And like crapped all over. So. Yeah, it wasn't the best experience, but that river was full of grass carp too, and those grass carp are very surface oriented, so they were munching down cicada, right? So, and it flowed through like a very untouched section of the world. Okay, so the Sangamon River was like being in the jungle, right? There were no houses near the shore or anything. I mean, it was beautiful, and seeing the difference between Decatur Lake, which was, like pretty, like, I mean, there were like really nice houses all around it, everything like that. And then seeing the difference between the Sangamon, which was really untouched earth, was pretty cool, and really unexpected. And that's kind of the best part about the cicada hatch is it happens in different spots year after year after year. So like you're fishing something new, you're fishing something new every time, right? Like this year, one of my goals would be to try to find some stripers eating cicada, some freshwater stripers.
See, you're always on the cutting edge. I can feel it.
I may or may not find that. I might find dozens of carp eating them too. I mean, whatever, but what I have found, and the big commonality between all this, there's only one fish I've found that won't eat cicada, and that's those Asian carp. Like the big head carp, not the grass carp, but the ones with like the low set eyes, like the ones that people are real fearful of getting in the Great Lakes. They do not eat the cicada.
Okay. Well, if you're not thinking about it, you might want to do some research and check out the cicada hatch. This is going to be probably not our last chance, but it's going to be a really good chance this coming year, correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's a big territory.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, some of these broods they hatch in a very small territory. This year, it's going to be fairly widespread and cover a bunch of different watersheds. And I mean, there's some really good maps of the last emergence, which would have been, I think, 2008, because it's a 17-year brood. So, where they emerged in 2008 is very likely where they're going to emerge in 2025. Well,
I'm hoping to join you, but mostly I'll be like probably deep into guiding.
You never know, man. I'll try to. I might come and kidnap you.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Let's. We're gonna shift gears. We got to keep moving on here. Me and you could talk for hours, but let's talk a little bit. You and myself both have been involved with Scott rods, Echo rods. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the rod business. The reels are pretty good. You're with Ross and Able. They're like our platform of go-to saltwater, freshwater. But let's chit-chat a little bit about rods. I mean, we're going to move and switch gears here a lot, but let's chit-chat a little bit about rods.
Sure. So, I mean, for me, I think that people start to get caught up in like, well, I own more than 3 fly rods, right? Or whatever it is, right? I mean, you and I hear this all the time. So what I would challenge all the listeners out there to do is go and watch even just 15 minutes of a bass tournament and tell me how many rods they have on the deck of their boat. And, the reality is that they probably have 10 on the deck of their boat and probably another 20 to 30 under the deck of their boat. And they are using those rods. They might not use all those rods every day, but oftentimes they're using, 6 to 8 to 10 of those rods in a single day to cover water and cover different applications. Now, all that said, there are cheat codes to being able to fish rivers and stuff like that. But I can guarantee you that, like, for instance, some of the stuff that we had already addressed in the pod, like for instance, casting to riprap, you're going to want a different line and a different rod than you're using fishing for, trout, dry fly fishing, right? You need to have the right tool for the job. And like with, obviously Scott with Echo, now Airlight, like each one of those rod companies, are designing tools to meet a specific need. And I'll give you an example of that, right? So Scott originally, I think they're the original. If not, I would be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure they're the original US made rod company that came out with an 8-foot 4-inch rod, right? So those 8-foot 4-inch rods, according to like Jim Barchi, because I've asked him about it, they were actually, especially in like the 10 weight, designed for pulling up sounding fish off the bottom. But a secondary purpose of those 8-4 rods that I would argue they're even better at than that is casting the short head lines of today. So like the integrated shooting head type lines, the SA Titan, the Airflow Sniper, the Rio Outbound, right? Those short rods are uniquely suited to cast those short head lines. Or I'm sorry, the shorter rods, the 8-foot 4-inch rods, are uniquely suited to cast those shooting head type lines.
We proved it just about an hour and a half ago.
Right.
We were just out yanking on them, stretching some string out in the grass here before we got in here.
Right.
And you don't have to have a long rod to do the duty, do you?
No. And I mean, actually, I would argue a shorter rod is super nice because 8 inches or 10 inches of graphite, whatever it is, or fiberglass in some cases, doesn't seem like a lot. But if you're waving that around all day, right, and you're doing repetitive casting, streamer fishing, whether it's to structure or out in open water, whatever it is, like by the end of the day, it makes a difference on the amount of fatigue that you have in your elbow, forearm, and your general casting mechanics. And, it feels lighter in the hand. It is lighter in the hand because it's, 8 to 10 inches shorter. And by the end of the day, like you feel better than you would swinging around a 9-foot rod, or, some people are fans of 9.5 or even 10-foot rods for that, which I can't do,
Yeah. Well, you basically were casting the whole line with an 8-foot 4-inch rod,
right,
with a couple of false casts. So it's nothing to do about distance.
right.
So I sometimes look at fly rod designs as there's casting rods and then there's fishing rods. And that's why I've been with Scott for 25 years, that they just sort of talk to the angler, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you're probably not going to hear this from many sales reps, I guess, but I would tell you that like, there's not a bad high-end rod on the market. Okay.
Right, exactly.
Like they all perform really well. I mean, the reason why I choose and love Scott is two things, mainly two main things, right? The look. Okay. They use really great components. They use top end cork, like the guide set, the aircraft grade aluminum that they use on the reel seat of like their, the Sector, for instance. I mean, all that just makes a fantastic looking rod. You pair that with, the hand inscribed, name, serial number, model that's on the rod, and then the unfinished blank and like the see-through wraps and just all the details on Scott, in my opinion, really set it apart from any other high-end rod manufacturer on the market. The second reason why I like Scott is a performance reason, and that is because Scotts tend to have a little bit softer tip than almost any other high-end rod on the market. Okay, and what that softer tip really helps you do is pick up at a shorter distance and recast at a longer distance, because that softer tip lets you feel the rod load on your initial back cast. If you're going back cast to a false cast, then your presentation cast. And a softer tip also, in my opinion, like it loads the rod. It creates like kind of a springboard to get the cast going, to get in the recast going. The other thing about a softer tip, and this is kind of a second tier reason though I really like it, is it protects lighter tippet really well. I would argue that a softer tip protects tippet better than a stiffer tip rod, and a fiberglass rod protects it protects tippet better than a soft tip rod, right? So
yeah, we just casted the Echo Badass Glass, and I will say it's pretty nice rod.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because, and we could go into the weeds on this, but I mean, the thing to remember is that people oftentimes make what I would call a misjudgment that, fiberglass is like a weaker material. It's just a different material, right? And you can load a fiberglass rod with the same exact lines you would in an equivalent graphite rod. And in some cases, I would argue heavier. And the fiberglass rod is going to deliver it. It's going to deliver it well. It's going to deliver it probably with providing a little bit of cushion to your casting mechanics. I often recommend fiberglass to people that are having, thumb, forearm, wrist, elbow type issues. And then it's really hard to pull a hook out of a fish with fiberglass because you have all that cushion in the tip,
Right.
So
there's something to say about fishing and casting.
Yes. Yeah. And there's definitely a difference between those two rods, and those two type of rods. And I do think that most high-end manufacturers create some type of a mix of both of those. Some lean heavier on the fishy side, some lean heavier on the casting side.
Hence why we got lots of rods.
Correct.
Like the bass angler.
Yeah.
Let's move on. So, we need to maybe speed up because we could probably take this into 2 podcasts, but what's new? You represent Montana Fly and there's lots of new fly patterns, but is there anything in the new fly tying materials that has sort of rocked your world here lately?
The Senyo satin chenille.
Okay.
I have, I use that stuff. I mean, probably at least 3/4 of the flies I've been tying has that Senyo satin chenille in it. I mean, I use it to prop up other materials. I will use it to twist with existing materials like Aquaveil, Polar Reflector Flash, whatever, and create kind of a 2-tonal wrap. You can almost create like a synthetic feather, essentially, like if you're tying a circus peanut or whatever. Right. With that combination, you can do, really sweet sparkle minnows. I showed you those. I do a lot of the collars on my swing flies with that stuff to kind of create a vortex in the front. I'll even trap rubber legs in between like Aquaveil and that satin chenille. This is a trick I learned from Greg Senyo, but in between, and then palmer it on the hook and pull them back and create like a rubber leg thorax, right? Or like a skirt. And it's such a cool material. And now he introduces this new shadow flash to kind of go with it, which is like a really low reflective flash. And essentially what we're trying to create is a system to either tone down or tone up your flash in a fly versus just having all flash or all dull. We want to be able to adjust it, right? And fine tune what you're looking for. And that satin chenille has really been a game changer for me. Yeah,
we should probably clarify to the listeners, Phil, when you say twisting, do you mean in a dubbing loop or when you mean the term twisting, let's go over that.
Sure. So what I'm talking about when I say twisting, right, is a satin chenille. It's a chenille. So it's a strung chenille on a cord. And what I'm doing is I'm twisting it up with another chenille on a cord, another corded chenille. And oftentimes, I really like the CNF hackle pliers, but oftentimes I'll just use hemostats, right? And clamp the 2 chenilles in the tip of the hemostats and then twist them. And then I usually have like a steel brush to just pull the fibers out and really kind of give it the good body. But essentially, I'm just twisting two pieces of chenille together.
Okay. Yeah. And sometimes if you tie like the satin flash forward facing, and as you're twisting the two chenilles together, you can just keep bringing back like a sort of like a horse mane in between each.
Yeah.
So as you're wrapping one wrap, you have your forward facing, your shadow flash going forward, then you pull back a couple strands, make a twist of the chenilles, then you can layer that like a horse mane going through the chenilles, correct?
Yeah, you can do it like that. I mean, like most of my flies though they're going to be two chenilles twisted together and then palmered as one, right?
Okay.
So like, that's generally how I do it. And what that ultimately looks like is like a lot of times the Sanyo satin chenille is like 10 millimeter, and then the Aquaveil is like 30 millimeter in length. So it creates like a core with the satin chenille, and then like fibers, like a lot sparser fibers with the Aquaveil.
Gotcha. So it's sort of like a typical steelhead fly where we're propping up with the finer fibers, giving it the bulk without giving it the illusion of profile without the bulk.
Correct.
Okay.
Easier to cast.
Okay. Anything else that's in the works that you don't want to maybe divulge, but is there anything else going on or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things in the pipeline that we've been like trying to figure out in terms of color, in terms of like sizes, that kind of stuff that, I mean, it's coming. There's going to be more additions to like being able to tune up and down your flash in a fly, like along the same lines as the Sanyo satin chenille. And there's one other material that actually Greg Sanyo also came up with, which is a dirty bird dubbing. And I've been using that a lot too. But I mean, those are two that like I would tell any hardcore fly tyer out there, like you should pick up some of that stuff and the colors that that call out to you, and you should pick up some of that stuff and really give it a go, because I think it's going to change your experience, and give you a more positive experience on a lot of even existing patterns you may tie.
Yeah, I mean that whole theory about like there's flash in your face flash and not. I mean, I remember back in the day when the silver plate, when I was a big time troller, and then they came out with the matte silver plate, which was silver plate. But before they actually came out with it, we would just take fingernail polish and go right over top of the silver plate to give it the dull flash under those days, like you said. And there's something to say about it. Flashes sometimes can be too much, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, take a snorkel, take a snorkel out there and go look at bait fish on the bottom, see how much flash they give off. Right. I think you'd be surprised to see how little they give off, actually. So,
yeah. This has been really great. I mean, me and you can go down the pipeline talking about flies and everything else. We've been going on for, at least an hour now. Let's just ask you, I know your dad got you into it, but let's talk about the learning process. I've had more mentors, and I'm super blessed myself to have, from casting mentors to angling mentors to lure building mentors. How about yourself? Isn't that the part of the stepping stone? Like you said about a fly, there's always like that base fly, but there's also the person that people don't give credit to as our mentors, don't you think?
Oh, I think absolutely that's the case. And I mean, it really, to me, I mean, I don't think either of us would be where we are without, having the mentors we did. And I mean, to be honest with you, like it's probably one of my favorite parts about the industry is like now being in a position where I feel like I could impart, some of the things, some of the nuggets I've learned like through the years, and watch people go out and be successful with that. Like that's one of the major joys of working in this industry for me. My dad, obviously he got me into fishing. I remember fishing, like he was a Presbyterian minister. And I remember fishing off of, one of his congregants' docks, right? And we were fishing bobbers. I was like 3 years old, right? And he hooks this fish, and it's humongous, right? And it's under us. And I don't even remember what the fish is. I think it was a walleye, because I've asked my dad about this story, and he has no idea, But I think it was a walleye. But I just remember seeing this enormous fish thrashing under the dock. And I mean, it was like it's imprinted. I mean, I still remember it, And I mean, it could have been a pike, could have been a walleye, whatever it was, but it was memorable. I'll tell you that much. And then, just going along, like my grandpa, I don't think he had very much interest in fishing, but he saw that I had a fire under me. So he would take me out on trips in saltwater, and I'd hook into ladyfish that pulled, and all these other saltwater fish, snook and redfish and everything. And like really it just stoked the fire. And then, it was funny because when I was out west, I fished a ton. I had obviously fished the Sable a bunch. And when word gets around in Grayling, Michigan that you're becoming a guide, there's some mixed reactions. Let's just put it that way. But there were a couple gentlemen that like really spent the time to help me get better and improve my skills. Jerry Regan and Ron Riccozzi were two of those guys. And Ron really helped me with like how to properly pull a riverboat, how to do a well done dinner, right? A dinner spread for your boat or for multiple boats. He showed me a lot of things about how to be a professional, right? And then you go kind of further on and I had this guy, Jim Johnson in Midland, who had been bass fishing since the mid 60s, right? Since way before it was cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was very uncool, but he was a heck of a bass fisherman. And, he fished things for bass that I had never seen people fish for bass, like little Dave's hoppers, like ants. I mean, he was very much a student of the local rivers where we lived. And, him kind of taking me under his wing and showing me his process. I mean, I'm grateful for all of it. And I'm grateful for the people that took time out of their day and their life to, educate me with nuggets, big or small. I mean, I think that you and I can sit here and honestly say that we've learned things, whether about fishing or even in life, from people that might have been the least fishiest people we knew or in that class, but they thought about things in a different way. They, they helped us along in the stepping stones of fishing or in life, and we can look back today and just be really thankful for those people that they did that, and I think that, like I said, at the beginning, and I really truly feel like this, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation, talking about our joy for fishing, without those guys and gals that did that for us.
Right. I think my job as an ambassador and your jobs as, in the industry as a professional sales rep is to pass the torch to the next generation the right way, just like it was passed to us. But, that when it was passed to us, it was more low keyed, right? Because there was no social media or none of that, right? They just did it because that's what you do. And now that, there are like myself and you, that's what we're going to do to the next generation. So think about mentoring, think about that. I have mentee like many mentors myself, Phil. We're going to wrap this up. We are going to do another one of these because me and you can go on forever with all over the Great Lakes. And if you have any questions, be more than happy to reach out to Dave or myself at the Wet Fly Swing, of course. And I'm sure you might get quite a few questions to ask Phil about your local fisheries if you're in Michigan or have another fishery around the Great Lakes that you want to apply to or anywhere else. Reach out to myself and we'll get the questions answered. And thanks for the listen and looking forward to the next episode. I think we're going to dive into some maybe brook trout fishing up in and around the north shores of Lake Superior. But thanks again for the listen and catch you on the next one.